Good morning. Thank you all very much for coming today. My name is Charlie Winkworth-Smith. I'm from the Knowledge Transfer Network. Just before we get started, a few bits of housekeeping. We're not expecting any fire alarms today, so if any do go off, please exit the building and follow the... If any of you have used the B2B Beta Match app to sort out meetings later, there is a room just next door for your one-to-one meetings. If you haven't found them already, the facilities are right down at the end of the corridor, and most importantly, lunch will be served where you had coffee this morning. So we've got an interesting agenda lined up for you today. First of all, we're going to hear from Janet about the competition, some of the aims and scope of the competition. We'll then hear, there'll be plenty of time for questions after that talk, so please keep those to the end. We're then going to hear about equality, diversity and inclusion, which is very important for this competition. Simon's then going to give a quick introduction to the KTN and talk about how we can help, and also give you some top tips. After the break, we're going to hear about human-centered design. And then after lunch, we've got a range of speakers who are going to for low and middle income. So I'd now like to introduce Janet Geddes from Innovate UK, who is going to tell you about the competition. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you very much for coming out today and spending the day with us. I presume that everybody was a bit familiar with Innovate UK, but is anybody not familiar with us and what we do? Excellent. A room full of converts. Okay, so today I'm just going to talk through primarily the scope of this competition. We have a separate applicant briefing that's going to take place online. Between one submit your application into our innovation funding service, and full details about the eligibility as well. So just again a bit of a poll of the room. Who's familiar with the Global Challenges Research Fund? Okay, so about half of you. So just to summarize, so this is a fund sourced from the UK aid budget. It is managed by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. It's a £1.5 billion fund, and it's really using the strength of the innovation system in order to find new solutions to development challenges. It's delivered by a range of delivery partners, and as of this year, Innovate UK, as part of the UK. Sorry, the mic's going a bit in and out. Okay. There's a new strand within GCRF, which is focused on innovation and commercialization. Part of that is about looking at pathways to impact for the large investment in research that's been made to date under the fund. And some of it is about supporting businesses to work collaboratively and find new solutions to development challenges. UKRI has a lot of resources about GCRF online. For example, you go onto the database, which is at the link down below, and you can understand what has been invested so far through the fund and where, and by the different component councils of UK research innovation. So this is quite a useful resource, I think, if you're trying to understand what the fund has done so far in particular countries. So why has Innovate UK set up this competition? Why have we decided to do this? Why demonstrate impact? So our assumption is that there are solutions out there, commercial solutions, business-led solutions out there to important challenges, development challenges in developing countries. but for various reasons they're not yet in place. And I think there's various challenges that we know of. Some of it's about, for example, businesses being reluctant to enter new markets. Quite often we've been told this, that there's investment risk is just too high for investors. Sometimes they don't want to take both a new technology and a new market risk. That's too much for them to take. We know that it's sometimes difficult on the customer side of things, that they don't have the resources or the opportunities for awareness to try out innovative approaches. And of course, they are reluctant to buy solutions that are unproven. So really this competition is set up to support businesses to work with end users, other stakeholders, researchers, and test the feasibility and viability of a new solution within the context it is going to be used in. So for us, the key aims of this competition are these. So it's about enabling business to demonstrate the potential impact of their solution in the place it's going to be used within. It's about supporting those projects that show really transformative, positive change in the lives of people within developing countries and on their economies. Now, what do we mean by transformative change? And this is quite aspirational, perhaps, but for us, it's really about projects and businesses and ideas that are likely to lead to the creation of markets, boost the infrastructure and the value chains attached to those markets, and ultimately create jobs as well. So as I said, we feel this is aspirational, but this is what we're really trying to support. And that being Innovate UK, we do not support ideas, products, services that are already commercially available in those markets. This is about pre-commercial within the market you're focused on, and it's about ideas that need further research and development in order to ensure that they're viable and can be taken to market within that country. So what we want to see are solutions that are responding to a felt need, demand, or a gap in the market in that developing country. For us, we want to go beyond supporting projects that focus primarily on the technology, but also have thought about their business model and financial model within those markets. We realise this is still pre-commercial, as we said, and we're not expecting a fully blown business model, of course not. But we really want to support businesses that have done some thinking around about how they will take their products to market. We want to support solutions, as I said, that have that high socio-economic impact and have thought about how they're going to achieve it. And as we said, project teams that are businesses, end users, and other stakeholders required and necessary to help you demonstrate your solution. What we do not want to support is tech push, really from the UK, ideas that really haven't grounded out whether they are appropriate for that market and done some of the thinking. So that's not what we want to be funding. So what does success look like for us? So this being from our aid budget, the primary aim is always about the difference that we're making within the developing country. And for us, it's seeing that particularly poor and disadvantaged people within the developing countries can access and benefit from the new products and services that are developed and ultimately deployed through our support. As we said, these benefits are direct of having a new product or service in the market, but also through the creation of new value chains or infrastructure and jobs. Secondary outcomes, we're Innovate UK. We want to see UK businesses and other businesses succeed, take new products and services to market faster. So we believe that this will help businesses test the applicability of new ideas in new markets and potentially find new R&D partners and hopefully new markets for products and services. So moving on to the competition structure. So we've phased this competition into two phases, and the competition that will open on the 9th of September is for phase 1 only. So it's a staged gate competition where only a successful set of applicants from phase 1 will be invited to go on to phase 2. So phase 1 is about feasibility studies, and it's really to support applicants to investigate the feasibility of a potential second phase demonstration phase, and help you prepare robustly for that. And we would welcome feasibility studies that use human-centered design approaches, and my colleagues, Ben and Ed, are going to talk more detail about human-centered design and the applicability of it. Projects that also want to focus or use technical feasibility processes are also in scope for this as well. And we're giving a small amount of money, so 60k for up to 6 months to run this phase. Phase 2 is then actually about demonstrating your new idea within the market. It's about exploring the applicability and appropriateness of that refining modification that will go on. We will phase in terms of Innovate UK state aid language. That phase will either be in terms of industrial research or experimental development, which attract different funding rates for businesses. And we will give up to £500,000 per project for 1 to 3 years. So why feasibility studies? So we thought this would be a useful approach to help, I guess, de-risk this investment, both for businesses that are doing it, also for Innovate UK. It's difficult quite often to find appropriate partners and to really understand whether you've got a solution that is appropriate for a market. So really that's why we want to give a small amount of money during a phase 1 to help you go out, find potential partners if you haven't found them already, make sure that you've got everything in place to really run a robust demonstration phase. So that's really why. It's about partner identification, plan how to run a demonstration phase, and really gain confidence that you've got applicability in that market. At the end of phase 1, we will ask successful applicants and grantees to submit a report that contains various sets of information, obviously what you've done in phase 1, an implementation execution plan for the phase 2, roles and responsibilities of all the partners involved, a results framework for the phase 2, and a business plan. Again, we understand that this will be some sort of business plan rather than a fully fledged one at this stage. The competition is structured like this. I won't go into it in too much detail. I think I've talked through it, but really, as I said, phase 1, then there'll be a stage gate. A set of successful applicants from phase 1 will be invited to submit another application for phase 2. This being Innovate UK, we have to go through proper processes. This is public money at the end of the day. So 6 months phase 1, and then up to 3 years for phase 2. So the scope. So there is £9.3 million available for this competition. We're making £1.8 million available for phase 1, 7.5 for the phase 2 demonstration project. As I said, it opens on the 9th of September, which is next week, and it closes on the 13th of November. To be in scope, your project has to do the following, and I'll go into each of these in more depth. So you have to have an innovation that is demonstration ready. So this is not about early stage, just out of the research base ideas. These are ideas that are much further along the innovation pathway, the TRL skills, whatever you want to use, and actually at the point where they are at a place to be demonstrated at some sort of scale. You have to be eligible for receiving official development assistance, which is the aid budget. We are focusing on 10 of the 17 sustainable development goals. You have to focus on a DAC list country, and you have to tell us how your project will positively impact gender equality and social inclusion. And my colleague Zoe will go on to talk about that in a bit more depth. So I'm not going to go in, sorry, it's a wordy slide, but is everybody familiar with official development assistance? Or does anyone need a refresh? No, a refresh, okay. So ODA, I'll call it ODA for short, is a measure of a country's investment in aid, as the slide said. It's governed to some extent by the OECD based in Paris, and it's basically aid that's provided by governments and other official agencies to a set of countries on a list that has to be spent for the promotion of economic development and welfare improvements. It's about reduction of poverty in developing countries, in a nutshell. So the OECD has put together a list of countries, and that's based on their own socioeconomic status. I'll go on to mention it, and that's called the DAC list. So those are countries eligible to receive this. Just a point to make is that capital investment in the home country, so in the UK, is not eligible under ODA. So what we are able to fund are running costs and capital expenditure, capital usage, okay. But CapEx within the country is not eligible under ODA rules, which we have to abide by. So is your project eligible as ODA? So applications must seek to investigate or address a specific problem or seek a specific outcome in one of the developing countries on the DAC list in order to improve their welfare and economic development. You have to tell us why that is a problem. So, some homework needs to be done as to why is that a particular problem for that particular country. You have to tell us how you will, at the end of the day, think you will have an impact on the ground within that country. So how will your idea actually make a difference to somebody's life? We understand it's a long chain of innovation. We get that. But we have to, as Innovate UK, we have to justify that. So we have to ask that information from you. So what's your theory of change? What's your logic model? What's your results that you're expecting? And how do you expect to get there? And in phase 1, we're also asking that you actually do some work in the partner country that you're going to be focused on. So that is about ODA. Is that, anyway, questions at the end. So where can your project focus? So this is really, really wide. Unfortunately, I don't have the DAC list here, but any countries that are on the DAC list, so there's about 170 countries on the DAC list, and that ranges from India through to Zimbabwe, for example. We're taking some countries out of scope as focus countries for this, and we're taking the countries named here. So Argentina, Antigua and Barbuda, China, Panama and Palau out of scope, so they will not be eligible as focus countries. I wasn't able to include the DAC list here, so please, these slides will be made available, and please go and check the link that has the full list of countries that are eligible there. But they spread across the world from Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe. It's a long list, which is perhaps a little bit sad in some ways, but there's a lot of countries that can still receive aid. So that's it. So that's in terms of the country focus. Now, what can your project focus on in terms of, I suppose, the challenge? So we are going to look at 10 of the 17 SDGs. Sustainable Development Goals, again, a quick intro for people who are maybe not familiar. Set of global goals, follow on from the Millennium Development Goals, and really about identifying and tackling the most pressing challenges in the world. 17, they interconnect, and I think what's really critical to understand is that these are not goals for developing countries, these are truly global goals, and it's about a commitment to end poverty everywhere. So we've decided to put 10 of the 17 in scope for this competition. So some of the speakers this afternoon, we focused this workshop a little bit around education and the decent work and economic growth. So some of the speakers this afternoon will give a little bit of insight about what they're doing that fits under that. But please, I think the first thing is to familiarise yourself with the Sustainable Development Goals. So what we're asking is that your project tells us which one, maximum 2 of the SDGs that you feel your project falls under and is aiming to meet. So we understand you might think you fit under more, but really we want you to tell us maximum 2 where you really think you've got that impact. Some of you, as your businesses, you might already have done this. I know that some investors do ask businesses to map out where they sit across SDGs. I believe there's a number of tools online that support you as a business to also understand where you best fit under these. So, yeah, as I said, these are the 10 that are in scope. Just for information, so there's some that are not within scope. There's a couple, so there's one looking at access to energy and there's one looking at food. If you're interested in either of those, I would say that please direct yourself towards our Catalyst programs. So the Energy Catalyst program is open at the moment and the Agri-Tech Catalyst will open later on this year. So the other thing we're asking you to do is, first of all, tell us your up to two SDGs, but then within each SDG, there's a number of targets that have been set by the UN. So we haven't dreamt these up, these are there online. So we want you to tell us which targets you're aiming towards. So for example, under quality education, which has the overall objective of achieving inclusive and quality education for all, I've just picked up 4 targets here. A lot of it is about accessibility for girls and boys, but also looking from the primary right through to the tertiary education levels as well, and also looking at skills training. So you'll have to do a little bit of homework, understand all the targets that are there under each of the SDG and really think about, okay, this is the one I really want to target. This is what I think my project's going to look at. The final thing that your project needs to do, as I said, is explain how your project, how it's helping to promote gender equality and social inclusion. So the aid budget is also transferred to us under a particular act around about gender equality. So we really want to understand who's involved, how you'll factor this into your plan, and what's the potential. And as I said, Zoe, my colleague, will talk about this in a bit. So just to recap, so the main things we're looking for in terms of scope is that you have an innovation that's at demonstration ready phase. So this is phase 1, as I said, but still your innovation should be at demonstration ready phase. So phase 1 is to help you set up for phase 2. It has to be ODA eligible. It has to focus on one of the 10 SDGs in scope for this competition. It has to focus on a DAC list country, and you need to tell us how it's going to positively impact the gender equality and social inclusion. I know that's a little bit complicated, but hopefully that is straightforward. And by the way, all this information is there now published on our website, Innovate UK. If you Google Innovate UK competitions, you can filter by GCRF, it will come up with everything. So there's certain things out of scope, which is, I guess, the antithesis to what I've just said. The one thing I think to bear in mind is that, I think technology has an incredibly important role to play in providing some new solutions to the SDGs. However, it can also have a negative impact upon SDGs as well, upon progress. So that needs to be looked at by us as well when we're assessing applications. So you, as part of the application process, you will tell us what is the positive impact you hope to have, and also whether you think there will be any negative impacts from it. So nearly there on the slides. So who's eligible? So this is going to be a competition that where we support projects that are business-led. We need to have an administrative lead and a technical lead, and I'll go on to explain that because it's a little bit complicated. You can include partners, both funded and non-funded partners from any country, and that could be businesses, research organisations, charities, other not-for-profits. In phase 1, you can subcontract up to 50% of the total project costs. And that's because we're particularly keen to see design agencies and others engaged within this under the human-centred design aspect of it. Research organisations are eligible for 30% of the project costs. And as I said, you must include some work carried out in the developing country. So the project costs, for those of you familiar with how we operate, is that Innovate UK will never give 100%, we're not able to give 100% grant to a business because of state aid rules. So we're estimating that project costs will vary between £85,000 to £120,000 for phase 1, and we will give a maximum of 60k for a whole project for all your partners, etc., etc. The maximum per project 60k grant, and up to 6 months. So we're following this approach to the competition. So we have to ensure within, as a spender of UK aid, that we're complying with legislation around about untying aid. So in a way, we're not favouring UK businesses. This is not about aid for trade, and we avoid conversations like that. So what we're going to ask is that you include both an admin lead, administrative lead, and a technical lead on your project. So the administrative lead needs to be a UK registered business of any size. They will be the recipient of the award and will distribute the funding on behalf of all the partners, so not just the internationals mentioned there, but all the partners. They will manage the finances and they must claim funding themselves. So that's UK registered business. The technical lead can be any sort of organisation that's eligible for funding from us, from any country. So not the developing countries, any country in the world. So we expect them to lead on the development of the scope, the work packages from a technical perspective, and they must claim funding. And just to be clear, so UK business can be both the admin and the technical lead. Complicated, huh? But this is how it goes. So hopefully that's clear, and happy to answer questions. This will also be covered in our applicant briefing webinar as well. So funding for feasibility studies. So as per state aid rules, so we can give up to 70% of the project costs to a micro or small business. If you're a medium-sized business, 60. If you're a large business, you're 50%. Universities get 100% of the amount that they ask for, 80% at FEC. Other research organisations, charities, public sector will get 100% of the amount that they ask for as part of the grant. And international partners will be funded on the same grant percentage. So if you're a small business in Uganda, you will get the same percentage as a small business from the UK. And as I said, all their claims will be have to be submitted through the UK administrative lead. So not to complicate this further, but to be clear, partners from the developing countries, they're not mandatory as part of phase 1, because we want you to use phase 1 to really help you identify a partner from that country if you haven't already. Does that make sense? But during phase 2, we are going to make that mandatory. So you will have had to identify a partner within one of the DAC list countries in scope for the competition. Key dates, we're here today. I said the 9th, closes on the 13th November, and we hope to inform applicants before Christmas, hopefully as a nice Christmas present for most of you. So we've got different services in place to support you. So our customer support services team are there for you Mondays to Friday, and we'll answer a query on the phone, by email. Knowledge transfer networks, I think Simon will talk about what's there to support you. I just want to point you to another thing, which is the GCRF online community platform through Crowdicity. So this is a platform that's been put together. It's been primarily researcher focused to date, but you can sign up. And you can potentially find a partner or a researcher or whatever. I'm not saying it's going to be the most useful thing for you, but if you're interested, I'd say go on and see if it's going to be helpful for you. And that's it for me. So thank you for bearing with me through that long and hopefully not too complicated scope check. So any questions from people? I can't guarantee I've got all the answers right here.
Hi, just a quick couple of questions. This is the first time this is the first round of this competition.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would, for the phase one, what would be the number of projects do you think that will be submitted? And what do you think the success rate will be? Will it be like 50%? And the same for phase two?
Yeah, so it's difficult to know success rate because this is a new competition for us. We're hoping to fund, I think, 30 projects in phase one. We are going to run 2 rounds of this whole competition as well. So round 1, phase 2, round 2, phase 1, phase 2. And that should open next year. But it's difficult to know what the success rate is going to be like.
If you failed in the phase one or phase two, can you submit the same?
Yeah, I think we'll allow that, yeah. Because I'm sure there'll be some learnings.
Presumably give feedback.
Yes, yeah. So we all our applications are independently assessed by up to 5 assessors, generally 5, and they will give feedback, which we will share with you as well.
Are you going to talk later today about the scoring? How it's scored?
I'm not going to do that today, so I would point you to our applicant webinar, which will also be recorded, so you can look at that at your leisure.
Is it the same usual
Please
one
use the microphone if you're asking a question.
There's people online, sorry, there's people on the webcast, so could you use a microphone, yeah?
I think we'll just move around so everyone gets a chance to talk.
Yeah, so for phase one, if let's say that you are targeting a solution that spans over different countries, and you have 3 potential partners in 3 countries, can you, for example, pay a small amount and bring them as contractors, like, for example, £5,000 or £2,000 to enable access to farmers, for example, in different countries?
Yeah, so we will allow, so it's a good question about looking at multiple countries. We do allow subcontractors. Subcontractors from those countries will be eligible, for sure. Yeah. I think probably what we'd like you to do is say primary country market that you're focused on. Yeah, that would be the approach.
Thank you. Hitesh Patel from Brunel University.
Hi.
A couple of questions. First one, can a university partner with a business if they've sort of taking on a follow-on project from a Newton-funded project, which is obviously worked with an ODA country? Is that something that a university can do?
Yeah.
Provided the company is leading?
Yeah, don't see why not.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing was, you said obviously that admin and technical can be 2 different. So if the technical lead is a university, what, 50% of the budget goes to the university to manage it with the partners, or how does that work?
No, well, it will all still flow through the admin lead.
Oh,
and it
all
was
right,
it's
okay.
still per those rules, so it's still only 30% total project cost for you for research organisations.
Okay, all right, thanks.
That's it.
Griffin, Green Energy Limited. My question has to do with the SDGs that are in scope. I observed something on climate change or climate effects, and something on sustainability. How is that different from the energy catalyst?
So the energy catalyst is primarily about access to modern energy and the energy trilemma. So that's the focus of that competition. We're not saying, I mean, because we've got other vehicles or programs in place to look at, for example, energy access and, I suppose, improved food security and nutrition. We want to give the opportunity for other projects looking at these SDGs to kind of have room to do that. It depends on how you, I suppose, you word your application and what your focus of your project actually is on the ground. I mean, if it's on climate change, that's quite ethereal in a way. What are you doing about it? So it really depends on what your actual solution is.
I'm looking at doing a renewable energy and pipe-borne water supply.
And what's...
Pipe-borne water. That's clean drinking water.
So I'm happy to have a conversation with you during a break, if that would help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you. Stephen Blakely from 3B Impact. I had a question about the eligible countries.
Yes.
And particularly in phase one, do we have to actually identify specific countries, or can we indicate where we might be looking for phase two?
We'd like you to identify the...
And would we be locked in to that country?
I think,
that's the
yes,
case?
to some extent. So we would want you to have done some initial scoping yourself.
Okay.
So yes, I know it involves you taking a bet or gambling to some extent when you're putting in the application. But yeah, we want some thought to already have been done, perhaps some scoping yourself in your own time to be able to do that.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, this is another countries question. I do a lot of work around smart islands. Is Jersey considered UK?
I think so. From what perspective?
Yeah, but I mean, some of the overseas territories are, but a lot of the work we've been doing is in Jersey currently. But we've come across this problem again and again in the fact that Jersey is part of the British Isles, not necessarily part of the UK, and it gets a little bit complicated. So if they were to lead a project, do you think they would be allowed to?
I'm looking at my learned colleague Anna, who might. I think we might need to take that one away for you and get an answer from our competitions team. So it's really whether, as a Jersey registered business, you're able to lead. Yeah. Okay. Have you had an answer before?
I had an answer I didn't like.
Right. Okay. We can check that. Anna, do you mind making? Thanks.
Hi. Maz Ahmed from the MTC.
Sorry, Maz. I
I just wanted to confirm that whether or not catapult centres can lead these projects.
Depends how
you want to class it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if we class it as an RTO, whether we class it as a business.
Yeah. So business, yes. If you're RTO, then no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's right.
Okay, Simon, are there any questions? Oh, very efficient.
Hello, thank you for that. I'm Larissa from Safety Net Technologies. My question is, can we put in multiple applications or just one?
Yeah, you can put in multiple. I think that there is, if you check online, I think you can put in up to 2, don't quote me, but it's there on our website for sure. Yeah.
Thanks. Just want to follow up an earlier question. Obviously, you're saying that in phase one, you don't have to have ODA country identified, but
no,
say
do,
there are 30 projects.
You do.
Or you do, sorry.
You do.
Or I got the feeling you were saying you don't have to be working initially. You identify someone, but you're not sort of doing the demonstration there. Is that right?
Right, so you need to tell us which country you're focused on, but you don't need to have identified a partner within that country as part of your phase one application.
Yeah, so my question is, if you haven't identified a partner, and let's say there are 31 projects that come out good, and the 30th is the one that's got the partner, and the 31st, it hasn't identified, that would be a tricky choice to make then, or doesn't matter?
We look at applications from many different regards, as I'm sure you know, Hitesh, so it will be one of the factors, it's unlikely to be the governing factor within that. This is why we've phased it as this. It's really about helping to de-risk, as I said, for you, but also for us. We know it's difficult, particularly if you're sitting in the UK and you think, okay, I might have something that's applicable, I don't know. How do I go about finding out? So, yeah.
Hi there, Andy Williams from Avanti. Got a nice, easy question for you.
I'm sure.
Innovation is, of course, mentioned. And what do we really mean by innovation? Are you able to expand on that? How are you going to...
Sorry,
can I give you an example? So in education, for instance, are you looking at innovation in the education element? Are you looking at innovation in the way it's delivered? So for instance, in the education sector, just delivery of e-learning through satellite connectivity, for instance, which is something we'll talk about this afternoon. That could be considered innovative in the educational sector.
Yes.
From a delivery point of view, it's not really innovative in terms of the technology that's used, but from an educational perspective, it is. So, are you able to elaborate at all on on the innovational element and how you'll decide
Yeah, so
innovation?
it's a really, really good question, Andy, and I'll probably take the easy way out, to be honest. I think for us, it's different things, right? And this is such a broadly scoped competition from that regard. I think what we want to see is the impact of your said innovation. That's really going to be critical to us. Like, where do you think doing the project is going to make a difference, and how is it going to make a difference? So it could be in the delivery, it could be in some other aspect of it. You need to tell us why you think it is innovative, particularly in that market. But it could be from many different regards, and it's not just about technological innovation as such. We will look at business model innovation. So, sorry, slight cop-out, but you know.
The answer for me was you're not looking just at technology innovation.
No. No.
So, obviously one of the really exciting things that sometimes happens with new technologies that could be very much in the job creation space would be forming a new company. Have you had a chance to think about the possibility that an overseas partner could actually be a new company that's so new? So I've been involved in Innovate UK projects in the UK, where Innovate's very comfortable with the idea that the companies barely exist at the point of that first Innovate grant. Obviously, they need to be able to provide the 30% of costs. But have you thought about that in the context of an overseas country? The specific example I'm aware of is we've talked a number of times with an institute in India about forming a spin-out to develop a new technology. Would that be something which we could put down as a fundable partner?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think probably what we would need to see at application stage is some sort of identification of their legality within that country. So are they registered? We would require to see that. I mean, we understand that through the lifetime of a project, it might be one of the project outcomes is a new company. But if we were to give them funding, we do need to see something. That's just too risky, I think, for us. It is public money, it's our money, it's your money, so we have got that to consider. I'm happy to chat offline about that as well.
So I've got a question from online. It's from Jelly Bee Films. They ask, is there a way to approach countries or companies who are looking to do something to get in touch with tech companies who want to be tech partners in these applications?
So if it is, I'd say if it... Go on, Charlie.
There's the online beta match platform where you can find partners. So anyone that has registered for this should have a link to that app.
So I think they're mainly focused on, is there any help that Innovate or partners can offer to find overseas contacts?
Yeah, so I think the best bet is probably to have a look at the UKRI Crowdicity platform. If there's particular countries that businesses are interested in, I'm happy to have a conversation to see how we can support. It's really difficult for us to get quite proactively engaged in helping. We do understand it's always the biggest challenges that businesses face. I would refer people towards the Enterprise Europe network as well, the EEN. So the EEN exists, it's a bit of a misnomer that it's Europe. It's actually a global network and they have presence in, I think it's 100 and something countries. And if you're interested in finding a partner in another country, they should be able to help you as well. So if you just Google Enterprise Europe Network, or even put in a request through our customer support services about how to go about doing that, they will help you. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Regina Zhang from Mendu, and I want to ask a follow-up question to an earlier question, because I sort of understood from earlier that that innovation is not just technology, and I'm wondering then, if that's the case, how should I think about a technical partner for that type of project? Or the technical lead, sorry.
It's a difficult question. Can I have a conversation with you, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah, I can see that taking a while.
Hello there, my name's Katrina and I'm from Aggregated Technologies. I've got a similar question. I have a ready solution with robotics. How does one define how they apply that to the project? I do help match and support business solutions with robotics and I aggregate data. I'm using it in an educational environment at the moment, but how you said it needs to be ready. How does one apply that and scope that out?
So, I suppose, what we think is that, so when I say ready, it has to be ready to be, I suppose, demonstrated within that country.
Within this market, because this is for a business market,
Yeah.
I'm hoping to translate that to an educational need.
Yeah.
So is that okay to
Yes.
reformat that? Fantastic.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
fine. Yeah. So, hopefully, if you were to apply for phase one, I don't know what market you're focused on, but you'd say, this is the SDG, this is the market, this is why we want to run a feasibility, this is sort of project partners we need to identify, this is why we're doing it. We know that the product isn't, we can't just lift and shift, and that's what we don't want to do, but it needs some R&D. So.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Samantha Abrego, and I just want to ask about if there is about the impact if we have to demonstrate it for a certain amount of time. The reason why I'm asking this is because I recently applied for another proposal and they asked me to demonstrate the impact for within 3 to 15 years. So is this the case as well for this call?
I'd say yes, in a way. To be honest, there's no hard and fast rules around this. Okay. We know that depending on the sector, sometimes you could be like a year away or less from market, or you could be much further away. We want, as I said, want to fund late stage. So I would say probably within a 10-year, 10-year time frame, but hopefully a bit quicker than that.
Okay.
The pace of development changes so fast, right? If you've identified a need now in that market, then I suppose the assumption is that with some time to run a 3-year project after that,
all right,
it would be at a stage where people would be keen to explore buying it or using it.
Okay, thank you so much.
That's all right.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there.
One last one online. One last one online. So the question is, why was Sustainable Development Goal 17 excluded?
Which one's that again?
It says here, which prioritises new global partnerships.
Yeah.
And then they go on to say, innovation can be a powerful enabler of new connections and later of progress on other SDGs.
Yeah, understood. And it was a difficult choice to make. We wanted to, for this first round of this competition, narrow down the focus a bit and see what kind of response we got. We also wanted to pick up SDGs where I think it's easier to see where, I guess, new technology, to use that word very broadly, new solutions can really play a role. It's quite focused. It's easier for us to understand how you're contributing towards particular SDGs. So I think that's why we might revise that list in the second round, but at the moment, that's why we've got those.
I've got a very quick
Hello.
question. Hi, my name is Eleanor Earle and I'm from Arup. Thank you very much for your presentation. I wondered whether applications that are kind of more set towards humanitarian assistance could be applicable.
Humanitarian.
Yeah, I appreciate the definition of development's pretty broad, but that was my question. And a sort of little sub-question, if your partner is based in multiple countries, including ODA countries, but potentially in the UK as well, is that a problem?
So on the second point, it depends what their role is, but shouldn't be. But it really depends on the role. I think so on humanitarian assistance. There's not a separate goal these days on humanitarian assistance. So again, it's about how you frame it. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'd now like to. Applause for all those questions. Yeah, thank you. I'd now like to introduce Zoe Jones from Innovate UK, who's going about equality, diversity and inclusion.
So thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about equality, diversity and inclusion. We're going to start off talking about why that's important to business and innovation. I'm sure many of you know that it's very important. Then move on to why it's important to us at Innovate UK and what we do about it. And then finally finish by going into a bit more detail about question 2 on the application form, which is focused on gender equality and social inclusion. So, many of you may have seen this. This is a McKinsey report on diversity. Diversity and inclusion isn't just a nice to have, it actually contributes to improving profitability for business. We like to use this slide because we think that's a good point to emphasise as well. So this is focused on executive boards, and this is basically saying that increased gender diversity on executive boards improves profitability by 21%. And increased and improved ethnic and cultural diversity increases profitability by 33%. So not just a nice to have. What can go wrong in innovation without focusing on equality, diversity and inclusion from the start of your innovation journey? So there's an article down here, a TechCrunch article, which is basically saying that the lack of diversity in AI is not merely a social or cultural concern, it's a life or death safety issue. This is linked to car crash test dummies and how many of these have been used, they're basically men, they're male bodies, and it can actually massively increase the risk of fatal or serious injury for women because they haven't been involved in that testing process. In other products like automatic soap dispensers, for example, when only white skin types, users with white skin have been used in the product development process, it doesn't recognise black skin. So there's a video circulating recently. So there's a big problem with, if you don't think about EDI and diversity and inclusion from the start of your innovation journey, you're going to end up with products, business models, services that aren't inclusive, and they're not right for the market. So what do we do about it? We believe that the best ideas for innovation can come from anyone, that diversity within business is proven to contribute to enhanced performance and commercial success, and that diverse teams produce better outcomes. So at Innovate UK, we have UK-based targeted programmes. So one of those is the Women in Innovation programme. The other one is Young Innovators. And these focus specifically on an underrepresented group in business-led innovation. So we've had a look at our application data back in 2016 and realised that only 1 in 7 applications were led by women. And that wasn't good enough and that we needed to do something about that. So we built a programme that provided financial and non-financial support for women to make a step change in their business, and also to really shine a spotlight and create new role models through a campaign approach on, to say that Innovate UK is here to support women innovators as well. And this is Laura from our Young Innovators programme. This was a partnership with the Prince's Trust, where we supported 24 young people from diverse backgrounds, provided them with a small financial grant and also non-financial support. But the work that we also do is working with teams, GCRF teams, for example, to work out how best we can embed equality, diversity and inclusion across everything that we do and fund, which is equally as important. So for this call, there is a gender equality and social inclusion question. All Innovate UK-led GCRF and Newton Fund competitions will have this question, and at the moment it's mandatory but unscored. So you have to address this in your application. As Janet mentioned earlier, this ensures compliance with the International Development Act, but really we're much more interested in how you are considering this from the start through the whole of the logic of your project, not just ticking a box on, to comply with ODA rules. So we also understand that not everybody is an expert on equality, diversity and inclusion, but we want to make sure that you've all addressed this in your applications. We're going to go through the question next, and that we will provide support to help you build that into phase 2 and to help make sure that it's being fully addressed. So, and also, here we've referred to gender equality and social inclusion because that's what's included in the International Development Act. But we're looking for good applications will show an understanding of diversity and inclusion beyond gender. So here is the question. So we really want you to think holistically about your innovation project from the start to finish. Who is going to be involved in your phase 1 project? Do you have any relevant diversity and inclusion experience, and how are you going to factor that into your project and use that for benefit? So when you're building connections and relationships with partners in developing countries, how are you making sure that you're linking up with the right partner organisation so that the users that you're going to be providing impact to are involved in the project and that the innovation is right for them? So we also want to see you identify where you need to build those links and that you don't have the current expertise at the moment. So how are you going to factor this into your project plan? We want to see, we want you to describe how your project is specifically going to improve or have a positive impact on to address gender equality and social inclusion issues. So this would also include poor consumers, disabled people and older people. And we want you to explain how you're going to measure this throughout. And also there's a project plan, as Janet described, and we want you to really build this into the logic of the project and the impact model. So finally, what is the potential? What are the expected outcomes of your project and the benefits of your innovation on gender equality and social inclusion? Are there any potential negative impacts, and what are the gaps in your current understanding? This is a reasonably new thing for Innovate UK to ask this question on an application form, but it's something that we're looking to build much more widely across our UK-based programmes as well. We're not just going to leave you alone to kind of do this. We are here to provide support to you. And I'd also like to hear where any thoughts you have on this at the moment in the next break. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Just have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Thank you for that. This is Stephen Blakely from 3B Impact again. If it's important, why is it not scored? Doesn't make any sense.
Very good question. Partly because we haven't done it before, and we need to figure out what questions come in so that we can understand the level of understanding in the business and innovation community. I'm not sure if we are going to do this, but in other GCRF programmes across the UKRI, they reserve the right to send it back to the applicant and say you need to make changes to this because it's not good enough. In the future, it may be scored, but that's where we are at the moment because we don't know what the answers are going to look like, basically. We haven't asked this before.
Okay, thank you very much. Great. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Simon Yarwood, who's going to tell you about KTN and some top tips for your application.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to do very briefly about the KTN because I'm guessing if I said anyone here not know who the KTN is, put your hand up. Not many hands are going to go up. Okay, I've never had a zero sum. That's quite impressive. So that will be very quick slides. Then I'm going to just give some tips on the application process, which can be carried out into any Innovate grant or even private investment. So just some highlights. So this is the first bit, the context, because even though people know who we are, they often don't know where we're from. So we're funded by the lovely Innovate UK. They're lovely because they fund us. And they do lots of other things, and we're part of this Connect piece. And of course, our previous speakers mentioned Enterprise Europe Network, and we have some catapults. So this is all part of this, helping people find connections. So we don't give out the money ourselves, but we help you find it and help you apply for it. So there you go. That's the official spiel. The slightly less official spiel, when people say, what do you actually do? I only really do three things. PPP, people, products and pounds. So officially, we help people find expertise. So the question about, can you help us find a company to work with? If it's in the UK, then yes. We help people find markets for their products, and we help people find finance. Now that finance can be Innovate UK grant, it can be overseas aid, but it could also be private investment, equity investment, angel investment. So we have a wide range of contacts in the finance industry if people are looking to go a step further than a grant. But we can also help with loan advice and pointing people in the right directions for those things as well. So this is our full official list. The slides will be shared because it is a bit of an eye test, I do understand. But really we're there, to, as I say, to help you understand what is happening in a marketplace or in a technology, to help you find a partner to deliver your next thing. Because often we speak to people who say, I've got an idea and I can do this bit, but I'm missing the person that can do this bit. Can you help us? And that's where our 120-something staff, like myself, who look after communities, will be able to look into those communities and say, right, I suggest you talk to this company or you talk to this person. And that's where we try and give you that sort of the hand-holding introduction and help you get that next innovation step. But also helping people understand where they can go to find their own market intelligence, and then also helping people look at applications that come into things. So as was mentioned, if people want to apply for grants or funding, they can send a draft to the KTN and we can give you some feedback. We cannot help you write it. We do often get asked that, but that's not within our remit. There are people that will do that and we'll leave that to you. What we can do is give you some feedback based on experience of looking at grant applications and funding applications. So some, tighten up this section, maybe want to include this. And we do ask, try and send us those sorts of things 2 weeks before a deadline, because it does get a little bit hectic on application day, should we say. So, my colleagues in our Access to Funding and Finance team have made my life really easy, because they've actually written a guide. And it's called the Good Application Guide, and that's its front cover, and it's available online. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through its 4 top tips that the A2FF team give out, and give you some examples of what you might want to consider on those. And really just some, as Charlie said, top tips. And this will go for anything. This is eligible for this call here, but could be applicable to any other calls or any other investments or business case pieces. So, is there actually a market for the thing you want to make? Because passion projects are great, but if there's no market for it, you're going to find it actually quite hard to get people to support it. Even the very generous R&D money you'll find from the government, who are there to help shore up those interesting passion projects, you need to really understand what is out there. So I have literally seen people say, oh, if I just get 20% market share, the market's worth 4 billion, if I could just get 20%, I'll be set. And you're like, so, and that's in 3 years. Yeah. So if you can manage 10%, you're doing quite well on a lot of markets. But actually, will that justify it? Can your percentage, my 1% market share, are you really going to get the money back? And that's what an investor, government or private, will be looking for to understand. Can you be world leading? Is it distinctive and strong? So when we're looking at GCRF, there's the question on what is innovative. It's something new and different. It can't be bought. So my comment here is, can you really not just buy it at a comparable cost? So maybe not for GCRF, but in other calls, someone's come to me and said, I can buy this thing for £250,000. My version will cost £10,000. And that actually received quite a good score, because the innovation was in totally changing it. The solution was the same at the end. It was to do X, but they created a new way of doing it that massively lowered the cost of entry, which actually then widened the scope, allowed export. But also, can you not get the it? And I use it because it could be a service, an idea, a business model, not just a physical product. Can you not just get a consultancy to help you do it? And those are critical things, and that is what we'd expect you to have in your market awareness, because then you know what else is going on. Is this right? So most of the time when you're looking for funding, they'll be looking for things that are at the, it's not on the research lab bench. It's moved off the bench. You're poking things with sticks. You're pretty sure they won't blow up anymore because you did that bit earlier. And what you're trying to do is create your, maybe a proof of concept, maybe take something forward and prove some fundamentals on it. And really, what they're often looking for is something that is market-driven with a need. And again, they're different from that passion project. So with core Innovate UK grants often, so things like the SMART, the old open call, one thing that is to be considered is, do you have a partner in mind for this? Because again, if you're just making something because you think someone will buy it, it's less likely, I would suggest, to be as popular to an assessor than something that actually has a potential market and a potential customer. And if you've got that, can you bring them on board as a partner for your application? Because that will then prove, again, your market awareness, your knowledge of your product / service, and an indication will be given that it will be more successful and it won't just sit on a shelf somewhere. And then finally, the fourth fundamental, why should there be investment in this? Why don't you get a bank loan? Why shouldn't you look to private investment? It's often a difficult one to ask, and it's a very difficult one to answer often, because people are quite passionate about what they do, and the problem with a loan is you're paying interest. The problem with VC is you're giving away part of the thing that you've created. So people look towards public money possibly as a less risky element to losing something. But on that, it's about persuading people why, and a big thing about that is risk. If it's a sure thing, go to a bank. If it's a sure thing, maybe look at an investor. Because regardless of Dragon's Den, investors look for things that aren't going to lose them money. And actually, the big thing for me is, and the thing I've seen people fall down on time and time again, risk registers. If an application process says, give a good risk register, please do not write a paper-based exercise that says, oh, this risk can be easily mitigated, and this risk can be easily mitigated. And I've literally seen people write themselves out of scope for that particular question. And this is only when they've given me the answers themselves, so I never get to see it otherwise. But people have literally been written out, and the assessor's feedback has said, it's low risk, it's not really eligible. Government funding is here to help shore up risk. They want risky, edgy innovation. They're not going to throw money down a pit, but what they want is something where they need to help shore up that certainty. So I think this is a really important thing for me, and I've seen people disqualified because they forgot to tick a box on the finance section, but I've also seen more people not get through because their risk register has not actually been a genuine piece of analysis to say these are what the risks might be. And assessors will be looking towards that. Where's your copy? These slides will be shared. There is your copy. It is a PDF. Click straight on that and you can view it in browser, or you can just click to download. It goes through all of the 10 common questions for Innovate UK applications. It was updated a year and a bit ago when some of the questions changed slightly. So it is an up-to-date guide and does get updated with changes every time something changes in the application process. It is aimed at Innovate UK core grants, but the fundamentals and its general principles will help you with anything you are looking towards if you are looking for funding and investment. I want to say one thing. I said earlier, if you send something to the KTN to look at and you've got any questions on it and you want some feedback on an application, then you can come to Charlie, myself. We have an open policy where you come to us, we'll find the right person. There is one exception to that rule that I would point out today, given that we've had an EDI section, is my colleague Shawan, who's going to wave her hand now, is our lead on EDI. So if you have any questions, particularly on that section, in regards to this and other pieces on equality, diversity and inclusion, please feel free to go straight to Shawan. If you can't remember who she is and remember one of us, we'll just point you in her direction anyway, but I think it's very worth pointing out we do have a person specifically for that area. Two other things I want to mention. In the presentation this morning, talking about what's in scope and what's being looked for, sustainability was talked about. And a colleague mentioned there were tools out there that you look at sustainability. The KTN actually curates a tool for BEIS and Innovate UK called the Horizons tool, which is actually equipped to help people look at sustainability and how there is applicability to sustainability in what people are planning. So it looks at a set of 32 principles of sustainability, and it's a free online tool, and people can poke and prod it and test theories against it. Another tool we have is called Business Model Canvas. Innovation Canvas. I knew that wasn't what it was called. Sorry. It's called Innovation Canvas. Thank you, Charlie. And that is another tool that we create and is available publicly. I think an online version is going to launch very soon, if not already, but staff can take people through a paper-based exercise as well. And that could be something people could look at to test a theory in some of their plans. And it asks a set of questions, an open tool, we can help people use it, and it lets them understand where they might want to maybe strengthen things, tighten things up, or look at other areas to focus on. Right, and then at the end, we talk about support. This was an attempt I had at making a diagram. I failed really badly because I can't do drawing, so I made a table instead. I'm reasonably good at tables, I think. So just going back to what we're talking about in your help support in the UK landscape, this table tries to highlight what the government-funded support mechanisms are and what they do and don't do. And this is even more of an eyesight test than that second slide I showed you earlier. So again, there will be links and this will be sent out to people. But this tries to give you an idea of where you are might be on that technology readiness scale. So, 1 to 3, university, 4 to 6, testing things out with an Innovate grant, 7 and a bit, the catapults, 9, your products in the market. So what we've done here is just an attempt to show you where you might want to look and what sort of things you can get. So you'd look to Innovate UK or UK Research and Innovation for grants, but you'd look towards EEN and KTN for help and support and advice on where to go, and you'd look to a catapult centre to actually help make the physical thing because they have state-of-the-art facilities where you can actually do stuff, do the physical building bit. That's my contact details, and the slides will come out at the end. And please do sign up to our newsletter, because then you can find out about other funds like this. And that's it.
Thanks, Simon. Do we have any questions?
Thank you. My name is Isabel. I'm from Loughborough University. I had a quick query about the risk register, and I wondered if you had any suggestions. From the experience of completing applications, not specifically Innovate ones necessarily, but looking at developing quite an extensive risk register, the problem I've come across, is microphone not working, is the word limit. So if you look across, environmental, social, financial, a whole level of risks, and really trying to demonstrate that you've thought about things and that you're putting steps in place to mitigate those and you're aware of what the impacts of those might be, I struggle to actually, and so it's just whether you've got any tips about, do you focus on the 3 or 4, do you try and go into depth on all of them? I don't know.
Yeah, no, so I can give you feedback on what I've seen other people do successfully, because I've never written one, and I'm pretty much hopeful I'll never have to write one. So good luck to everyone that does, because wow, they're interesting. Is focus on the key elements you feel are going to be what's looked at by the assessor. So you understand that by looking at the scope and by looking at how other questions are phrased and understanding what you're trying to deliver at the end. My feeling, talking to people who've been successful in applications for other grants, has been they've focused on what the key things are. So what do you think so your assessor will, by definition, be considered an expert in the area that they're assessing for. So what would you think someone that is being asked for an opinion on this professionally is going to say, have they considered that? Why isn't that in there? But as you say, there isn't physically enough space for everything. And my biggest warning is, don't just say, oh, we can mitigate this, we can mitigate that, because it's a paper exercise. It needs some sincerity that you understand there is risk. And I think focusing on, as you suggest, on the most important ones as you see, and you would anticipate others to see, would be the best bet within a limited word count.
Agile Refinery, Greenest Energy Limited. Thank you for the table on technology readiness level. I don't know if you can help us with the definition of TRL level, TRL 3.
Okay, yeah. So 1 to 3 is generally considered, and I say generally, considered as something still inside the research base, so academia. So this is your fundamental research. This is not moving things into industry, generally. Which is why you would generalise, I'm going to use this word a lot, generally, that when it's moved out of that, that would be where a academic maybe wants to spin it out into a business or license it to someone else to try and develop it. And then your 4 to 6 is where it goes into that physically trying to do the thing. You've proved on a bench that it doesn't blow up. You're going to now try and show that it's a solid idea that actually can have legs and may lead to a commercial product at the end. But your end is 9, and that is a long way off from 3. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I understand. Well, how does the KTN help? For example, I've got something that's somewhere around TRL 3.
Yep. So,
And,
yep. So Charlie's great at that.
I have a hard time.
So if you're at those early stages, then you would normally be working in the research council area, EPSRC, STFC, BBSRC, etc., all the Cs, all the councils, and that's where funding would come from. And then when you're looking to move that to the next stage, then you'd be talking to our colleagues in the emerging technologies team, which is what Charlie is. I'm in the enabling technologies team, and we try to look at where people want to move things from that research piece. So, for example, someone comes to me, academic Imperial University came to me last year and said, I have this idea in power electronics, I want to try and commercialise it. So they were moving from 3 up to 4, 5. So I helped identify grants they could apply for, gave them some feedback on their application, introduced them to a potential partner because they needed the other bit of their idea. So they could do all this, but they needed this to create the end idea they were going to put in. So that's how we look to help take those things and move them along the chain towards an end product that could be bought off the shelf.
So what about product development businesses? Who can take your concept?
Okay, so if you're looking more for someone to help you with your business development piece and a product development, I would probably be looking towards the catapult centres as well, if it's a bit more advanced than just off the research bench. So catapult centres are state-of-the-art physical locations around the country on different subjects. You know, energy systems, electronics, digital, compound semiconductor applications, and they can help for a charge to be agreed on the situation and circumstance. But they also, as someone said earlier, they can apply into funding calls with companies often, so they can be part of a collaborative project application, and they can help with that. EEN offers something called Innovate to Succeed, which is a program that gives you some time with a pre-qualified consultant that helps you develop business ideas, can give you some advice on business plan development and where you want to develop your product and service. This is all funded via the Overall Horizon program in Europe. Okay?
Yeah, Andy Williams of Anti, just following on. So specifically for GCRF, where do you see that fitting? Is that more 4 to 6? Am I answering it for you?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah.
Because again, it doesn't have to just be a physical widget, which is why I used the phrase it earlier, because business model innovation is in there as well. And I would say, yes, it is more in the 4 to 6, because that's where the money is stemming from. I mean, it's a bit crude, but trace back the money. Look who's looking to fund it. If it's coming from a research council, it will be predominantly using really early stage stuff. So very quickly, STFC, Science Technology Facilities Council, will work with businesses on products/services in the digital space that are in the 4 to 6 range. But the point is, they're using the UK business-led high-performance computer in Daresbury to do it, which people are working on at the 1 to 3 and doing grants on advanced AI. So that there are very rare circumstances where they will veer off into the business world, and largely you will see Innovate UK. And in some cases, I want to say, in some cases DFID have done some other stuff similar for overseas development in the 4 to 6.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. Okay, we're going to have a quick break now, so can I ask you all to come back at 12? Thank you.
Everyone. There's not many of you in the room today, so there's a risk this bit might backfire. I'm going to go slightly off script. Put your hands up if, and I promise this won't affect your chances of winning innovation funding, put your hands up if you've ever used the hand dryer in a public toilet for drying something other than your hands. Oh, phew, it's not only me. In fact, that's the vast majority of people. So I think it's fair to say that's not an entirely rare use case. Now let's talk about the hand dryers that I noticed they have in the toilets at this facility and others that I've encountered. You know, the sort that you do this. You have to kind of get your hand into that little slot without touching the edges. Now I'm sure that that design solution ticked every box that the developers had in terms of the performance and the user requirements for that product. It dries your hands faster. It's perhaps more energy efficient, perhaps they decided it was more hygienic, it's compact, it's robust and reliable, which is all good. But if you've just spilt some coffee on your shirt or had an unfortunate encounter with a seagull, it's not going to deliver the goods for you. It's not going to help you dry your shirt before that important meeting. So the takeaway here is that human behaviour is unexpected. People don't always behave in the way that you might expect they're going to when you're sat behind your desk thinking about a new product or service. And that's important, right? If you're not thinking about that, then it really represents a risk for you. In the worst case, you could actually deliver a solution that's simply not fit for purpose. But in the best case, it's actually an opportunity. If you're thinking about the way that people behave and realistic use cases, it's an opportunity for you to develop a product or a service which goes slightly beyond basic functionality and actually delivers real value for people and is a delightful user experience. So my recommendation is this: if you're trying to design the best possible hand dryer, you need to spend longer hanging around in public toilets and observing human behaviour. At least that's what you ought to tell the authorities when they turn up. But perhaps more relevant to this competition, if you're trying to solve a global challenge for a market in another part of the world which you might have very little experience of, it's beholden upon you to understand exactly the needs, the motivations and the behaviours of the market that you're designing for, and understand that. Now, the good thing is that phase 1 of this competition is a fantastic opportunity for you to do exactly that, because we're not just supporting technical feasibility studies, we're also supporting human-centred research and design activity. So those are activities that can help you to better understand the market conditions and ensure that your idea meets the needs of customers, and to help you plan a more effective and meaningful demonstration. That's really important, because technology can be what makes your idea possible, but ultimately it's going to be people that determine whether or not it's successful. And innovation is nothing if it's not successful. When we're talking about people, it's also important to remember we're not just talking about users or even customers who might not be the same people that use the product. There are all sorts of stakeholders involved with the innovation process. And the first thing that you might want to do is actually start to map out and list some of those different people that you need to consider during the development of your idea. So you may have seen this presented before, the idea that the best innovations are those which are both feasible in terms of the technology available, desirable to people, and also viable in terms of the business case and commercial piece. Now, obviously, a technical feasibility study can help you with one part of that. Ultimately, that's about, can you do this thing? Is it actually possible? But human-centered design can actually help you decide whether this is something that you should do. It's perfectly possible that you could go off and test the feasibility of something which, at the end of the day, isn't the right solution for people. It solves the wrong problem for them. It's difficult to use. It's not considered valuable to them. So you really need to think about both of those aspects. And this competition is an opportunity to do that. In terms of desirability, sometimes when we think about design, we tend to think about the way that things look, or perhaps the way that they feel. But it's not just about looks. It's about whether it solves a problem for people, whether it's understandable, whether it's aspirational, is it easy to use, and does it fit readily into people's existing behaviour patterns? Is it going to be easy for them to adopt this new solution, or is there going to be some change in behaviour or change in perceptions required? So in engineering terms, if you're neglecting or misunderstanding people's motivations or behaviour, that's actually a potential failure mode. Just like selecting the wrong material or getting the performance criteria wrong, if people don't like the thing, if it doesn't meet a need for them, it's not going to succeed. And the less familiar you are with people's circumstances and cultural situation, the higher that risk. So it's really important in this kind of international project. It's less about data and secondary research. You can glean some useful information by carrying out surveys and looking at data sources that are available to you. But we'd really like you to take this opportunity to have conversations and experience things firsthand and get a feeling for what actually matters to the people that you're designing for. So why include human-centered design within your phase 1 project? It's an opportunity to sense check, to validate, and to de-risk ideas with the people that they're intended for before you launch into your demonstrator. The idea being, if you do this, you will actually have a stronger application at phase 2 because you will understand exactly what it is that you're trying to get from that demonstrator, and you'll have designed it in such a way that it reflects realistic use cases and it's actually meaningful. So you can gain confidence and indeed evidence that you're proposing the right solution to the right problem. Janet talked about the deliverable from this first phase as being a report, so you can incorporate all of this evidence that you gather through human-centered research and design within that report. And ultimately, to plan a more valuable demonstrator involving the right stakeholders from that extensive list, the appropriate infrastructure, and simulating valuable realistic use cases. So what might design activity actually look like within your project? This model is called the double diamond. It's something that the Design Council and others have put forward, and it attempts to put some framework around this fuzzy process that we call human-centered design. It goes through multiple stages. The important thing really is this left-hand side. So before you actually launch into doing anything, you go through this phase of discovery, of understanding the problem space that you're working in. Who are the important stakeholders? What are their needs and behaviours? And then using all of that insight to define a specific problem or an opportunity that you're going to respond to. That's really all about setting the design brief. And it's about making sure that you're doing the right thing before you then start developing potential responses to that challenge and filtering them down towards the ideal solution. The bit that's not shown here is that it can look a bit like a linear process. In reality, an important part of this is that you're constantly iterating, having ideas, testing them quickly with people, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and that's how you ultimately end up deciding which is the best route to pursue. Too often, we see this. So we tend to skip through that first hand, and that's perfectly understandable, because particularly if we're in a small business, cash flow is king, right? We need to start focusing on delivery. We need to get things out there into the market and start the money coming in. So we tend to work on assumptions and our preconceptions and our prior experiences in order to rush through the discover and define stages. We kind of know what we want to do. We just want to get on and make it happen. Likewise, once we get into the develop stage, we're a bit too focused on the one pet idea that we've got, and we're reluctant to really explore alternatives within that space. And the vast majority of our time, if we're not careful, is spent on delivering that one, what we think is a great idea, only to find at the end that we missed the mark slightly because we didn't spend that time up front. There's a good Frank Lloyd Wright quote that you can use an eraser on the drafting table or you can use a sledgehammer at the building site. Right? Much better to spend the time early understanding what you're trying to, the problem that you're trying to solve, gaining confidence that you're giving them the right solution before you work on delivering it. So that's one way of explaining the design process. There are multiple variations on the theme. If you go online and start looking into the world of design and design thinking, everyone has their own take on it, usually involving pretty icons and diagrams and colour schemes. The reality is they're mostly the same. It's just a case of whether they've pinned it down to 3 phases or whether they've gone a bit more granular and identified 7 different phases. Ultimately, the key things are it's about engaging with people at that early stage and really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve, and also this idea of thinking divergently, not being too focused on a single solution, but taking the time to explore and generate alternative ideas and test those as well. I'm not going to go into too much detail around specific design activities because we're very lucky we've got Adrian with us from Special Projects, who's an actual designer, who's going to give you some idea of how this might manifest in live projects. But you might start by identifying the relevant stakeholders, engaging with them, understanding their needs, their motivations, documenting all of that, mapping out what their ideal experience might be, and using that as a source of inspiration for potential ideas. Quickly testing those ideas and iterating, testing both the desirability and the feasibility. So you can incorporate elements of technical feasibility study in here as well in parallel. And ultimately, of course, documenting all of that and coming up with a proposed route forward, which might look like a roadmap or a design concept. Important to note that this doesn't just apply to hand dryers. So you might be developing physical goods, but equally you could be innovating in the space of digital products, services, processes, even business models. And all of those are within scope for this competition. So in terms of characteristics of a design approach, what would we like to see you doing? We do want you to build empathy with the people that you're designing for. And again, I can't stress enough, this is a great opportunity for you to get direct contact with people. Don't just sit behind a computer and rely on secondary data sources. Get your hands dirty, get involved. Do think divergently. Even though you might have a very clear idea at the outset of what you think the solution is going to look like and what you want to develop, take this opportunity to think of alternatives. Sense check what you're doing. This might be your last chance to spot a potential pitfall and pivot away from it and come up with something slightly different. Get your hands dirty, so both in terms of actually going out there and talking to people directly, but also make things, scribble things. You don't have to be an artist or a designer yourselves, but nothing starts a conversation like actually having something tangible in front of you, whether it's just a scribbled idea or whether it's a little model that you've made or some pieces of cardboard. If you can put something on a table in front of people, it helps you to have that conversation, helps people to feedback and give you feedback on what you're doing. And alongside that, don't be too precious. Again, if you've got an idea, and one thing that you can do is have a kind of idea amnesty at the start of your project. So get all that stuff that you're already thinking of and just put it in a safe space and spend a day thinking about other solutions. Make sure that you're thinking about all the different directions. So how can you go about doing this? Well, you could do it yourself. There are lots of toolkits out there. Often it's called design thinking, this approach, and there are all sorts of tools and methods that you can have a go at. But there's funding on the table here, right? And as Janet mentioned earlier, you can use up to 50% of your eligible project costs for subcontracting services. So why not take this opportunity to work with a professional designer or design agency? They're the guys and girls who have built a career from this, who've trained their brains to think in this way and really know the best way to structure a design engagement. So it's a great opportunity for you to connect with designers and work in that way. If you do want to do that, and you need to find a design partner, you've already heard about the services of the KTN today. They can help to put you in touch with designers. There are various trade bodies, the Design Council, the British Industrial Design Association, who have a member directory, as do the Design Business Association, and the Service Design Network, if that's the area that you're looking at. If you're going to use Google, it can be a bit tricky to navigate the design landscape because there are lots of different disciplines and names. Some people who say they're product designers are actually just delivering digital products like apps or websites, so it can be quite tricky. What I would suggest is look for people with expertise in human-centered design methodologies, because that's what we think will really add value in the case of these projects. And obviously relevant discipline experience in terms of what your solution is going to be. Are you developing physical goods, digital products, services, or a combination of those things? That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We've just got time for a couple of questions. No?
Have I got off easily?
No. Are there any questions online? No?
So, I think it's very good that you talk about human-centered design, but I think I'm a bit confused because I think the idea is to have a prototype, something ready, but now we're looking at, okay, come back to what you want to solve, and then involve humans in the process. So how does it work with the code and the competition?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think this comes around to the issue of risk that we've been talking about earlier. So you are going to be, if you're applying into this competition, you've already got probably an idea of the challenge that you're trying to address and what your solution might look like. But we recognise that you're not going to have all of the answers at phase one. That's the whole reason that this is a stage-gated process, is that by the time you're making an application to do a demonstrator at phase two, we want you to have taken the opportunity to put in place some of the pieces that might not be there to start with, to build some confidence around what your demonstrator should be and be sure that you're doing the right thing. So it's perhaps less about starting with a completely blank sheet of paper and coming up with a whole load of ideas that you never thought of, and more about sense checking that idea that you already have and taking this opportunity to look at, is it definitely the right thing to do? If you can demonstrate to us that if you go through this process and you make new discoveries, discover something new, which means that actually you want to change direction slightly, I think that's okay, as long as you've been through this process and you can show us in your report at the end of stage one, well, we set out to test this, but what we discovered was people need to dry their shirts in this thing as well as their hands. And if that leads you in a different direction, that's perfectly valid. That's the whole reason for doing this, is to kind of take this opportunity to address some of those risks. So it comes back to, again, when you're talking about risks in your application form, you might recognise that there are certain risks around human behaviour and aspects of people's culture or region that you don't understand. If you can show us that the design process that you're going through and the people that you're working with can help you address those risks, that to me is a strong application. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
At this stage, we say goodbye to those online. Just need to, yeah. No. So, sorry, we'll just have.